Good morning, Rock Church. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. Good to see you all here. It's great to be here. Glad you can come and join us. A couple quick things I want to celebrate before we get started. First of all, what a great time it was yesterday at our trunk or treat. Right? We had a great booth set up. Thank you to all your volunteers, especially Jim and Kathy. Thank you so much for all that you did. Give them a hand. They put a lot of time and effort, and we're here early and stayed late. And all of you guys who came together and helped out and served and just participated, thank you. Right? We just want to be a part of Apache Junction. We just want to be out there and give people a place to come and worship if they need to come and worship. So thank you for all that you did. I know we handed out 13 cases of water bottles. We just handed them out, gave them away. I think we had like 13 bags of candy that we gave away, and so it was just a great time. So thank you all you guys for helping and being a part of that. And I want to say thank you to Theron, who took our youth to a youth convention. That was Friday night and Saturday. My wife and I tagged along as chaperones and drivers, and so we had the pleasure of hanging out with 1,500 youth at this convention. And for me, my favorite part of youth conventions is just seeing all the kids worship. Right, as soon as they're about to start, you see the kids, they're like getting ready. They're getting ready in their seats, and as soon as worship starts, they all run to the front, and they just worship God without any reserve, and especially when they just start bouncing. Right, they just start bouncing, and they're playing music loud, and I'm just like, yeah, I love watching that. I don't bounce, so, but I love watching the bounce, and they had some great speakers. They had some great men that came and poured out to our kids and spoke to them. My wife and I got to stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday or Saturday, whatever day that rolled into. Then we got up at 6 that morning to get the kids ready. It was a lot of fun. So I slept good last night. But it was a lot of fun just to be there with our kids and all the other kids and just see what God is doing in the youth. There was over 300 that were saved or rededicated their lives, a combination of both that day of youth. And so that is awesome. That is awesome to see. And so thank you, Theron, for putting that together. I know she's out there still probably cleaning up in the coffee shop, but thank you for what you did. It was just really great. It's just great to see what God is doing here in this church and what God is doing in our kids and all the youth around this state. We're going to continue this morning in our series that we're talking about being fishers of men. And what does it mean to be a fisher of men, or what does that look like? And I started out 2 Sundays ago with asking the question, like, who is our mission? Right? Who are we supposed to go out and try to catch? Or who are we supposed to go and try and fish? And we read a story about how Jesus spoke to the Samaritan woman. And if you knew back in those times that the Hebrews, the Jews, and the Samaritans did not get along, but Jesus crossed that border. He crossed that line of separation and spoke to her. And he was showing us by example that everybody is our mission. That's who we're supposed to go out and reach, is everybody. We're supposed to share the gospel with any and everybody that we come in contact with. And so we got to be willing to accept that mission and move on. See, God has strategically placed each and every one of us, either in our jobs or in our church or our community or wherever we're at. He's placed us there for a reason. And we got to find that reason. We got to develop and figure out how it is and go out on that mission. And then last week I shared about why. Why are we on mission? Why am I on mission? Why was Jesus on mission when he came to earth and ministered for those 3.5 years? It's because it's who he was. It just that mission flowed out of his identity. Because he came here to help people. He came here to rescue people. He came here because he loved people and he talked with people and spent time. And I talked about how to the depth that we pour ourselves out to God, that he'll pour himself back into us. And then out of that overflow, we'll be able to pour out to those around us. And so we just got to get that why. It just has to be in our DNA. It has to be part of who we are. It has to be part of our thought process and our planning process and all that we do, because God wants us just to always be on mission, always looking out to help people. And today I want to talk about, that we're not meant to do this mission alone. We got to share this mission with those around us. We got to ask people to come alongside of us and help us. We got to ask people to go, hey, you want to go help me do this or do that? And so God wants us to be on mission. And before we get into that, our text is going to be in Luke chapter 8. But before we get into that, I got a quick question to ask you guys, and this is easy. Everybody can participate in this, and it's just a showing of hands. So by a showing of hands, how many of you guys out there can name the first names of your great-grandparents? Your great-grand, raise them high, don't be shy. Your great-grandparents. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 12 hands up out of about 70 people here in the room. That's not that long ago that your great-grandparents were alive. All right, how about your grandparents? How many of you can name the first names of your grandparents? All right, the majority of the hands are going up right there. Majority of the hands. And so I know I just point that out to show you that within a few decades, you're going to be forgotten. Within a few decades, a generation can change. And I know that's not a very motivational way to start out a Sunday morning, or it's not a very motivational way to start the service. But here's the good news, is that God's calling on your life is bigger than your lifetime. Let me say it again. God's calling, God's mission on your life is bigger than your lifetime. And so that's why he wants us to go back and take others with us and share the gospel and spread it, because he has a mission for us. You know, most of us can't go back, 3 generations to name our great-grandparents. But I wonder what it would look like when we go back and look at our spiritual family tree, when we see what God has done in our lives. And based on how the Bible reads, I have a suspicion that in heaven, we'll be able to study our spiritual family trees backwards and forwards. We'll be able to understand who God has who we've touched in our lives, and the ripple effects that has made throughout eternity. I'm wondering if we'll be able to follow up and see all those people that were touched by the things we said or the things that we've done. I know in my case, in my life, it was all because of my Uncle Duncy. Right? He was my dad's sister's husband. He was an uncle. See, growing up, our family grew up Catholic, right? Mainly just because we were Mexican, and when you're Mexican, you're just Catholic. That's just the way it goes. But half the family were practicing Catholics, and half of them we weren't practicing. We were the Christmas and Easter kind of Catholics. Well, my Uncle Donsi got saved one day. He got radically saved, and God changed his life. And in doing so, he started to witness and share with his family about the good news of who Jesus is. And a lot of the family shunned him. A lot of the family wouldn't invite him anymore to family gatherings, or wouldn't have anything to do with him. When he would show up, no one would talk to him or anything like that. But he stood for what he believed in. He stood for what Jesus did, and he invited my family to church. And we started going. And my mom was saved. And I got saved. And my 3 sisters got saved. And God changed something in our lives. And years later, after much time of prayer, my dad came to the Lord. So our family was saved, all because Uncle Donsi decided to invite us to church. And now I look back and see my kids go to church. My grandkids go to church. My wife's family goes to church. And just the ripple effect that it has throughout eternity on the difference it makes when we realize our mission and we go out and understand that our mission, our calling is bigger than our lifetime, because it's going to last and move on and go. And so today we want to look at a familiar piece of scripture. It's a scene from the life of one of Jesus' disciples named Peter. And you got to love Peter, right? Peter's one of those guys who we might know guys like this, but he's one of those guys that as soon as he opens his mouth, his foot goes right in it, right? Because he always says something dumb. He's always saying something, he's always making a bonehead remark or a bonehead action, or he's always just messing up. But yeah, Peter has a great heart. And Peter went on to do great things. And so you got to love this guy. But I want to take a look at what the Lord did. And the story we're going to be at is in Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 40. So you can turn your Bibles there, or you could turn on your phones, or you can follow along on the screen. But I want to start reading in Luke chapter 8, starting at verse 40. It says, "Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was the ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age who was dying." See, Jesus and his disciples get off this boat, and there's a crowd right there just waiting to meet him. And this man, Jairus, right, it says the ruler of the synagogue, and this is a man who's very important, right? It's equivalent to maybe like a city council member or the mayor of the city, or somebody high in rank and structure. Was this guy named Jairus, and he comes to Jesus' feet and says, "Jesus, I need your help. I need you." And the disciples see this and they say, "Oh, this is Jairus. This is a man of influence. This is a man who the city knows and they respect. This is a man who has some say and some sway in the city." They're thinking, man, if we can get Jairus on our side, if we can get him to follow along and be a part of our mission, if we can get Jairus just to come on board, he'll be able to help us along and do great things. I don't know what they were thinking though at the time, because they certainly weren't thinking what Jesus was thinking. Because Jesus had a mission. He knew what he was on. He was here to reach people. He was there to save people. He was here to minister to people. And the disciples had a different mindset on that mission. But through time and practice, their mindset changed. But they were thinking how Jairus could help us out. Let's continue reading down in verse 42. It says, "And Jesus went, and the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, 'Who was that touched me?' When all deny it, Peter said, 'Master, the crowd surround you, and you are pressing in on you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me, for I perceived the power had gone out from me.' And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace.'" It's almost funny how this portion starts out, right? This scene is there just a bunch of crowded people there just trying to get through. How many of you guys ever been in a crowded place? There's just a bunch of people like Walmart on Black Friday, right? That's crazy. That's crowded. Or Disneyland on a Saturday evening when everybody's trying to get out. I remember one year we went to Disney. We were able to go to Disneyland in Orlando, and we were trying to exit the park, and the only way to get out of that park at the time was you had to take a ferry to get across this little lake and get to your cars. Well, there must have been about 10 billion people trying to get through this little crowd. And I remember, I think Lawrence was just a baby because he was in a stroller. So I had him in a stroller, and I think I had my mother-in-law, Martha, she was with me, and we were just like, for a time. Finally, I just started pushing the stroller a little harder and bumping people, and they would get out the way, and we made it through. But there's times when it gets crowded and there's people all around you. And it's funny that how Jesus asked, who touched you? And then Peter's answer, right? Peter asked, "What do you mean, who's touched you?" "Everybody's touched you. What are you talking about?" And again, here's Peter putting foot in mouth as he tries to answer that one. Makes no sense, right? Makes no sense that Jesus asked that question, but Jesus knew something different. He knew something more when he asked the question about who touched me, because he perceived that he felt that healing. He felt that had gone out from him. And he felt that there was this woman that had touched him. There's a lot of things we can probably guess about this woman, right? We gather that first of all, she was poor. In some of the other Gospels, it says that she had spent all her money on physicians and trying to get healed, and she couldn't find a cure. She was alone, because we don't hear, as she speaks, we don't hear about anybody else who was with her, or none of the other Gospels record that anybody else was with her. And she had been seriously shamed and shunned by those around her. Because in those days, the religious leaders taught that that if you had a disease, that there was a punishment from God. And if you had that disease, you were unclean. And so she was shunned by the community. Nobody wanted to be with her. Nobody wanted to touch her. And in fact, by all rights, anybody who she touched in that area because she was unclean then made them unclean. And so there's no way she ever should have been there. But still, she pushed her way through the crowd. Still, she fought to get to where she was going. Still, she wanted this healing so much that she endured all the shame that would have come along with it. Right? All the questions like, hey, what are you doing here? You know you're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? You're unclean. Get away. Why are you coming to Jesus? He doesn't want to talk to you. Well, we know that that's why Jesus was his mission, was to come to talk to people just like her. And just like anybody else, just like the ruler of the synagogue. Jesus came to talk to all of us. And one of the things we learn from the scriptures is that, sometimes we have no idea when or where God is going to move. We have no idea when God is going to touch us or answer our prayers. She spent 12 years trying to find a cure. She had spent 12 years trying to get this thing taken care of. And she never gave up. And she said, if I could just one last time, if I could just reach out and touch that hem of his garment, if I could just touch him, I'll be healed. She had that hope. She had that tenacity, that spirit that said, I'm not going to give up. So if you walked in here this morning and you've been carrying around a burden that you've carried for a long time, maybe it's an unanswered prayer request, or maybe it's something that you're looking to find out, or you're asking God, show me, and you haven't heard anything yet. I'm going to ask you, has it been 12 years? So still hold on. Still press through. Still continue to trust God. He'll bring that answer. We just don't know when. But you got to believe that he's going to bring that answer. So hold on to the end and watch what he do. She held on. She trusted God. She believed in him. And he showed up at just the right time where she needed to be healed. He can do it more in one moment than any of the praying that we can do all our entire lives. So just push through. Hold on. Your answer is coming. Her answer came. Let's continue on. Verse 49. It said, while he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. But Jesus, on hearing it, answered him, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. And when he came to her house, he allowed no one to enter with them except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, do not weep, for she's not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. I don't know if I would laugh at Jesus. I mean, if I would have seen what he had been done up to then, changing that water to wine and doing the things like that, if he said something, I would say, yes, sir, she's just sleeping. They laughed at him. I just kept, anyways. And they laughed at him knowing that she was dead because they know better than Jesus, right? How many of us sometimes think we know better than God? I'm not the only one, I know that. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. Amen. Let's go get some food. And her parents were amazed. But he charged them to tell no one what had happened. So they get to Jairus' house, and his daughter's already dead. And I can imagine what the disciples were thinking, oh, man, he blew it. He blew this one. We could have had Jairus on our side. We could have had the keys to the city. We could have allowed us to rent any property we wanted to set up our church. But he blew it because he had to talk to that one lady that shouldn't have been there in the first place. They were thinking about a different mission. They weren't thinking about his mission. And so I'm sure they were upset because they were thinking about, things that could happen. And I get it. I get it because when you're in ministry and when you're in church, you want to see these great things happen, and you're thinking about, okay, God, if we can just do this, God, it'll blossom. If we can just get the right worship team to come in and lead worship, God, it's going to explode. And if we can just do this or do that, but that's not how God works. God works in spite of all of that stuff. There's churches out there that meet under a tree, and God's moving and touching their hearts and changing lives. God moves where he wants to move. And so you got to just be on that mission. So Jesus grabs a couple of guys and the parents and say, come on, let's go in there and let's just go see how she's just sleeping. And imagine being there in that situation, and hearing Jesus, what he said. I'm sure the parents were upset. They're grieving because their daughter had died. And the disciples were thinking, man, we could have done something else. And they laughed at his statement. And so they were just confused at that. But that didn't deter Jesus. That didn't stop him. He just kept pushing forward. He kept walking. He went to the little girl and grabs her by the hand and raises her from the dead and gives her life back, in spite of what everybody else was saying, in spite of what they were doing. And think about that for the parents. And in one moment, right, the synagogue leader of the area became a follower of Jesus. Because I don't know about you, but if Jesus said he was going to raise my daughter, he did, I'm going to believe in him till the day I die because of what he did. And again, think about that. Think about that ripple effect that had on the city around him, or the people around him, or those that are there. Think about that ripple effect of all that changed in their lives, because they had the faith and they believed in that. And we read these stories and I think all of us, we've missed the point, the most impactful part of the story. While Jesus was healing the bleeding woman and raising the preteen from the dead, there are things going on that I think we've missed, and here it is. Because when Jesus arrived at the house of Jairus, he didn't let anyone go in there with him except Peter, John, and James, and the parents. He brought someone along with him to share in their mission. He didn't want to make a big ordeal out of it. He didn't want to just boast about it, but he said, hey, you guys, come with me. Come and check this out. Let's see what we're going to do. And you might ask, why Peter? Right? He's the one that's always putting his foot in his mouth. He's the one that when he asks, Jesus asks, who's touched me? And he says, Master, there's crowds around you, pressing all over you. Everybody's touching you. But then he brings him alongside with him. He brings him on his mission. He says, hey, come, I want you to come and share with me in this experience. I want you to see what's going on here. And so he brings him along into the house. And why is that significant? Why is it that significant that Jesus brings Peter along? Right, going back to the main idea, I talked this morning that our calling, our mission is bigger than our lifetime. It has everlasting effects in eternity. And that's true if you join God on the mission. If you join him on his mission and share his mission, it's going to be bigger than our lifetimes. Jesus may be the single greatest leader the world has ever known, because he led people in the right direction. He showed them what it meant to care for people. And he did all this. He did all this without ever writing a book, without ever holding a public office. He was just in a small little area of his town. He wasn't global. He wasn't internet wide, or he wasn't any of that. And he was only on the public scene for about 3.5 years. But I say he's one of the greatest leaders because 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him. 2,000 years later, we're still bringing his story up. His mission was bigger than his lifetime. In those 3.5 years he was here on earth, his mission has lasted 2,000 years, 2,024 years if you want to get exact. The things we do for God will last way longer than we ever believed. And that little town where he traveled and talked, I don't know the encounter, but I couldn't imagine there could have been too many people there. And now there's over 2 billion people on this world that follow him. That's that ripple effect in hundreds of different languages around the world sharing it. Jesus always showed great intentionality to share his ministry with others, and he brought Peter along for a reason. And he charged us with the same response. He charged us with the same idea in Matthew 28:19. He says, go, therefore, and make disciples of the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. He's always going to be with us. So he's asked us to join him on mission. And think about the different applications that this command has for us. Right? On the one hand, it's as we go through our life, we intentionally share Jesus with those we meet. We intentionally say, hey, I'm going to talk to that person about Jesus. I'm going to share the love with that person. And the other application is you just bring people along with you on your day-to-day responsibilities, on your day-to-day activities, and you show them who Jesus is in your life. Because he says, therefore, go out. He doesn't say, you guys go out. He doesn't say, hey, I'm going to just let my disciples go out. He says, therefore, all of us. And we got to remember, why was that therefore? Therefore, it's there for us, so we can go out and do all that. Because if Jesus is truly in the driver's seat of our life, then it's not so much that we are bringing him with us, but that he's taking us with him. He's taking us on the mission. We're going along with him, and we're going along for the ride with him. As we serve in ministries, right? Invite somebody to serve with you. We have several opportunities how we can serve here in church, and ushers and greeters and worship team and coffee shop. There's all kinds of places we can serve. But if you're greeting or ushering in the morning, say, hey, Sally Joe, why don't you come and greet with me? Say hi to people. Or hey, Bobby Joe, why don't you come out and help me pass the offering plate around and collect the offering? We can bring those along with us, and as we do, we involve them in the mission, what's going on. And once you get involved in the mission that God has for us, it's hard to stray from it. It's hard to turn away from it. See, several studies have been shown that the average churchgoer in North America brings an average of 0 lost people to church in a given year. That's a hard pill to swallow. The average people. But we don't want to be average people. We want to be above average, because who are we on mission with? We're on mission with Jesus. He was an above average person that lived here on this earth. And if he's called us to be on mission, then we got to go with him on mission. After all, what's going to happen if you invite somebody to go on mission with you? What's the worst that could happen? They can say, oh, no thanks, I'm not interested. No, I don't want to say hi to people today. I don't want to smile. I'm not going to do that. But then what's the other thing that can happen? They say, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come and help. I'll go be a part. I just want to kick one of these things. I'll be a part. I'll come and join. And it changes their life forever. We can't be afraid of what's going to happen. We can't be afraid of what people are going to say. We can't have any fear on what God is trying to do in our lives. So getting back to Peter, what happens with Peter? Jesus could have left him outside. He says, oh, you had no idea what we're doing. You laughed at me. You're always putting your foot in your mouth. I don't need you to be here. He could have left him outside. But he didn't. He brought Peter along to teach him a lesson so that he could see the dead being raised and show Peter that even death is not such an insurmountable task. Because if you turn to Acts chapter 9, and it'll be up here on the slide, if Jesus hadn't taken the risk and taken Peter with him to go and see what he did with Jairus' daughter, Acts chapter 9 would have happened. So it reads here, it says, now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, laid her in the upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men urging him, please come to us without delay. So Peter rose and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas had made while she was alive, well, she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. He mimicked what Jesus did years before. He had the faith because Jesus brought him along and showed him. He wasn't laughing this time. He had confidence. He had faith. He knew what God could do because he had seen it happen. So he says to the body, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes. And when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive and became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And that last part, that's that ripple effect. And many believed in the Lord, and it went on. Why? Because Jesus saw past who Peter was and knew who Peter was going to be. He says, I got to bring this guy along with me. I want him to share in my mission to show what's going on. I want him to show him these things that are happening. Because one day he may confront it too. And one day he may come up with the same thing. And he wanted to show Peter so that Peter could do the same. And Peter learned. Right? He heals Tabitha, or he raises Tabitha from the dead, just like Jesus did for Jairus' daughter. And many people believed. God is the connect the dots kind of God, if you haven't noticed by now. If you've served the Lord for any length of time, you can look back in your life and see how these dots connect all through all your life, where God has placed you, what God has done with you, and how he brings you to the place where he wants you to be on the mission that he's called you to be. This is why God is calling on our life is bigger than our lifetime, because he's connecting the dots here and in the future. And things are going to happen down the line. As I said in the beginning, we're only 1 or 2 generations from being completely forgotten. We're only 1 or 2 generations away from someone forgetting your name. And that's a reality dose right there. There's only one thing that's going to last. No matter how big your current troubles are, they're not going to last. No matter how sick you are, it won't last. And no matter how big of a mess you are, that won't last either. The only thing that's going to outlast and carry you into eternity is Jesus. Going on with him on that mission, sharing that mission that he's called you on. No one may remember you in 30 years. And that might be depressing to some. That's a hard pill to swallow, yeah. But having a few extra people in heaven, that's going to make it all worth it. That's going to make it all worthwhile. When we were at the conference, a speaker was speaking. He wrote he was speaking out of Matthew 26. And Matthew 26 records the time where a woman had broken an alabaster jar of oil and spread it all over Jesus and the disciples. Again, foot and mouth. Why did you do that? Why did she waste that expensive oil? We could have sold it. We could have made some money to build up the ministry. Right? We could have funded more missionaries. And Jesus tells her in Matthew 26, he says, truly I tell you, whenever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. We're here 2,000 years later, still talking about this lady who broke a priceless jar of oil and worshiped Jesus at her feet. We share in this mission together. We share in all that God has for us together. One of my favorite movies, probably my all-time favorite movies, is Gladiator. If you guys haven't seen it, that's a great movie. It's just the story behind it is great. And there's one thing that Maximus, the general, right, tells his Roman legion who he's with in the forest just before they're about to face the enemy, Germania, supposed to ride into battle. He tells his guys, hey, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And this movie is old. I don't even know how old this movie is, but I think it came out when we were still in California, so I know it's over 20 years old. And that saying has stuck with me. It resonates with me. What we do in life echoes in eternity, good or bad. What we do in life echoes in eternity. So what do you want your echo to be? What do you want your ripple to be? If you're going to be remembered, what are you going to be remembered for? You're going to be remembered for that jerk of a guy who loved no one? Or you want to be remembered by that guy that went on mission with Jesus and he carried him through and did those things together? So what is God calling you to do? What is your mission? That's a question only you can answer. I know my mission. I found my mission. I know how it's going to go. And what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with that mission that God has given you? Are you going to do it by yourself? Are you going to walk it alone? Or are you going to say, hey, come with me on this mission? Let's go where God has called us to go. We can't do it by ourselves. We're not meant to do it by ourselves. We're each other's strength. We're each other's rocks. We help each other. We encourage each other to go along on that mission. And I don't want to do this mission all alone. You're with me, whether you like it or not. Even if God calls us to Montana, you're going. But who wants to do this mission with me? Who's going to go? That's a good question. Craig, I know you're with me. You're going to go on a mission. Get up here. Come on. Yeah, come up here. Who else wants to go on mission with me? Come up here if you want to go on this mission with me and this Rock Church and do this thing for Jesus, to reach people, to reach the lost, to give somebody some hope. I know you got a great testimony that you need to share with others. That'll change their lives. So come on, church. Who's with me? I better get out of the way. We're not going on this mission by ourselves. We're going on this mission together. For however long we're here, right? Even if it's a short time, we're on this mission. We're not alone, church. So look around. Look at that person to your right. Look at the person to your left. We're all on mission. Come on, Bertina. Join the mission.
I'm not crying every day.
That's okay. We'll love you. Even if you love the 49ers, we'll support you. I like how Kathy brought Isaiah. Said, come on mission with me. We're in this together. I want to look at you guys. I want to see your faces. I'm sorry if it causes feedback, Jim. We'll work it out. But I see here before me a bunch of great people, imperfect as you all may be. Right? We all have our hang-ups. We all have our struggles. We all fall. But we all have hope. We all have hope because we want to go on mission together to share the good news, to share the gospel, just to love people. Man, just to say hi and smile at them. That's why we do the trunk or treats, just to say hi to people. I'm not looking to build my church. I'm not looking to build this church. I'm looking just to share the love of Christ with those around us. And it's easily done when you give a kid a handful of candy, or you smile at somebody in the grocery store. But look around. We're not alone. We're in this together. And whether we're young or we're older, whether we can walk fully or walk slowly, you're still here. You're still on mission. And we're all in this together. And how wonderful this is. That God has called us all to be fishers of men. Go out and let's fish together. Let's close. Let's bow our heads and pray. Father,